Okay, sorry about that. The recording only can do 15 minutes at a time, so we'll just have to break this up into a couple different sessions, okay? All right, so right back to reading chapter 3. We're right here. Now the neighbors. Okay, so we're all following along. Now the neighbors knew they had witnessed a great marvel. They knew that they would now date from Kino's pearl, and that they would discuss this moment for many years to come. And these things came to pass, if these things came to pass, they would recount how Kino looked and what he said and how his eyes shone, and they would say, he was a man transfigured. Some power was given to him, and there it started. You see what a great man he has become, starting from that moment, and I myself saw it. And if Kino planning came to nothing, those same neighbors would say, there it started. A foolish madness came over him so that he spoke foolish words. God keep us from such things, yes. God punished Kino because he rebelled against the way the things are. You see what has become of him? And I myself saw the moment when his reason left him. Kino looked down at his closed hand, and the knuckles were scabbed over and tight where he had struck the gate. Now the dust was coming, and Juana looped her shawl over the baby so that he hung against her hip. And she went to the fire hole and dug a coal from the ashes and broke a few twigs over it and fanned the flame alive. The little flames danced on the faces of neighbors. They knew they should go to their own dinners, but they were reluctant to leave. The dark was almost in, and Juana's fire threw shadows on the brush walls when the whisper came in, passed from mouth to mouth. The Father is coming. The priest is coming. The men uncovered their heads and stepped back from the door, and the women gathered their shawls about their faces and cast down their eyes. Kino and Juan Tomas, his brothers, stood up. The priest came in. Why do you think Kino and Juan Tomas stood up when the priest came in the room? Is this anything like Kino taking his hat off at the gates of the doctor's house? Think about that for a moment. The priest came in, a graying, aging man with an old skin and young, sharp eye. Children, he considered these people, and he treated them like children. Kino, he said softly, thou art named after a great man and a great father of the church. He made it sound like a benediction. Thy namesake tamed the desert and sweetened the minds of thy people. Didst thou know that? It is in the books. Kino looked quickly down at Coyotito's head, where he hung on Juana's hip. Someday, his mind said, that boy would know what things were in the books and what things were not. The music had gone out of Kino's head, but now, thinly, slowly, the melody of the morning, the music of evil, of the enemy sounded. But it was faint and weak. And Kino looked at his neighbors to see who might have brought this song in. Why is this song here? What do you think? Who might be there to deceive Kino? But the priest was speaking again. It has come to me that thou hast found a great fortune, a great pearl. Kino opened his hand and held it out, and the priest gasped a little at the size and beauty of the pearl. And then he said, I hope thou wilt remember to give thanks, my son, to him who has given thee this treasure, and to pray for guidance in the future. Kino nodded dumbly, and it was Juana who spoke softly. We will, Father, and we will be married now. Kino has said so. She looked at the neighbors for confirmation, and they nodded their heads solemnly. The priest said, It is pleasant to see that your first thoughts are good thoughts. God bless you, my children. He turned and left quietly, and the people let him through. But Kino's hand had closed tightly on the pearl again, and he was glancing about suspiciously, for the evil song was in his ears, shrilling against the music of the pearl. The neighbors slipped away to go to their houses, and Juana squatted by the fire and set her clay pot of boiled beans over the flame. Sorry. Kino stepped to the doorway and looked out. As always, he could smell the smoke from the fires, and he could see the hazy stars and feel the damp of the night air, so that he covered his nose from it. The thin dog came to him and threshed itself in greeting like a wind-blown flag, and Kino looked down at it and didn't see it. He had broken through the horizons into a cold and lonely outside. He felt alone and unprotected. And scraping crickets and shrilling tree frogs and croaking toads seemed to be carrying the melody of evil. Kino shivered a little and drew his blanket more tightly against his nose. He carried the pearl still in his hand, tightly closed in his palm, and it was warm and smooth against his skin. Why is Kino, do you think, now feeling alone and unprotected? He felt so content and happy in chapter 1. What has changed since the morning of chapter 1 and now? And why, having great fortune, would he be left feeling alone and unprotected? Think about it. Behind him, he heard Juana patting the cakes before she put them down on the clay cooking sheet. Kino felt all the warmth and security of his family behind him. The song of the family came from behind him, like the purring of a kitten. But now, by saying what his future was going to be like, he had created it. A plan is a real thing, and things projected are experienced. A plan once made and visualized becomes a reality along with other realities. Never to be destroyed, but easily to be attacked. Thus, Kino's future was real. But having set it up, other forces were set up to destroy it. And this he knew, so that he had to prepare to meet the attack. And this Kino knew also that the gods do not love men's plans. And the gods do not love success unless it comes by accident. He knew that the gods take their revenge on a man if he be successful through his own efforts. Consequently, Kino was afraid of plans, but having made one, he could never destroy it. And to meet the attack, Kino was already making a hard skin for himself against the world. His eyes and his mind probed for danger before it appeared. Standing in the door, he saw 2 men approach, and one of them carried a lantern with light, the ground and the legs of the men. They turned in through the opening of Kino's brush fence and came to his door. And Kino saw that one was the doctor and the other the servant who had opened the gate in the morning. The split knuckles on Kino's right hand burned when he saw who they were. The doctor said, "I was not in when you came this morning, but now, at the first chance, I have come to see the baby." Kino stood in the door, filling it, and hatred raged and flamed in back of his eyes, and fear too, for the hundreds of years of subjugation were cut deep in him. "The baby is nearly well now," he said curtly. The doctor smiled, but his eyes in their little lymph-line hammocks did not smile. He said, "Sometimes, my friend, the scorpion sting has a curious effect. There will be apparent improvement, and then without warning, poof!" He pursed his lips and made a little explosion to show how quickly it could be. And he shifted his small black doctor's bag about so that the light of the lamp fell upon it. for he knew that Kino's race loved the tools of any craft and trusted them. Sometimes, the doctor went on in a liquid tone, sometimes there will be a withered leg or a blind eye or a crumpled back. Oh, I know the sting of the scorpion, my friend, and I can cure it. Kino felt the rage and hatred melting toward fear. He did not know, and perhaps this doctor did. And he could not take the chance of putting his certain ignorance against the man's possible knowledge. He was trapped, and his people were always trapped, and would be, until, as he had said, they could be sure that things in the books were really in the books. He could not take a chance, not with the life of, with this straightness of Coyotito. He stood aside and let the doctor and his man enter the brush hut. So what's happening here? What is the doctor doing? Is he tricking Kino? Does Kino know he's being tricked? Is he suspicious of it? Why can Kino not be sure if he's being tricked? Think about that. Juana stood up from the fire and backed away as he entered, and she covered the baby's face with the fringe of her shawl. And when the doctor went to her and held out his hand, she clutched the baby tight and looked at Kino, where he stood with the fire shadows leaping on his face. Kino nodded, and only then did she let the doctor take the baby away. Hold the light, the doctor said, and when the servant held the lantern high, the doctor looked for a moment at the wound on the baby's shoulder. He was thoughtful for a moment, and then he rolled back the baby's eyelid and looked at the eyeball. He nodded his head while Coyotito struggled against him. It is as I thought, he said. The poison has gone inward and it will strike soon. Come look. He held the eyelid down. See, it is blue. And Kino looked anxiously, saw that indeed it was a little blue. And he didn't know whether or not it was always a little blue. But the trap was set. He couldn't take the chance. The doctor's eyes watered in their little hammocks. I will give him something to try to turn the poisonous up, he said, and he handed the baby to Kino. Then, from the bag, he took a little bottle of water, powdered, and a capsule of gelatin. He filled the capsule with the powder and closed it. And then around the first capsule, he fitted a second capsule and closed it. Then he worked it very deftly. He took the baby and pinched its lower lip until it opened its mouth. His fat fingers placed the capsule far back on the baby's tongue, back of the point where he could spit it out. And then from the floor, he picked up the little pincher of pulque and gave Coyotito a drink, and it was done. He looked again at the baby's eyeball, and he pursed his lips and seemed to think. At last he handed the baby back to Juana, and he turned to Kino. I think the poison will attack within the hour, he said. The medicine may save the baby from hurt, but I will come back in an hour. Perhaps I am in time to save him. He took a deep breath and went out of the hut, and his servant followed with the lantern. Now Juana had the baby under her shawl, and she stared at it with anxiety and fear. Kino came to her, and he lifted the shawl and stared at the baby. He moved his hand to look under the eyelid, and only then he saw the pearl was still in his hand. Then he went to a box by the wall, and from it he brought a piece of rag. He wrapped the pearl in the rag, then went to the corner of the brush house and dug a little hole with his finger in the dirt floor, and put the pearl in the hole and covered it up and concealed the place. And then he went to the fire where Juana was squatting, watching the baby's face. The doctor, back in his house, settled into his chair and looked at his watch. His people brought him a little supper of chocolate and sweet cakes and fruit, and he stared at the fruit discontentedly. In the houses of the neighbors, the subject that would lead all conversations for a long time to come was aired for the first time, to see how it would go. The neighbors showed one another with their